Hi, welcome to Concussion Dog Podcast, episode 138. I'm talking to Chris Ryan, and my actual co-host today is Cassandra Stockley of Newfoundland Labrador Branch Association. But we're talking to Chris Ryan, who is an music artist here in St. John's. And but before I talk to Chris about his experience with concussions, which is pretty eventful, so we'll get him to talk about it. But first, I would like to thank my sponsor, HeadCheck Health. HeadCheck Health bridges the gaps in concussion care through simple, powerful technology. Join organizations like the Canadian Football League, Pack Factory Racing, the Canadian Junior Hockey League, Eastern Washington University, and Volleyball Canada. Rely on HeadCheck Health to improve communication and optimize care. Visit headcheckhealth.com for more. Garbled that one, but you get the idea. Chris and Cassandra, welcome to co-host, and Chris, welcome to the podcast, and thanks for joining me. And so first, I guess let's get you just to tell everybody who is Chris Ryan and what just in your music. So how do you stuff and all that? Well, that thing, but I mean.
I guess professionally, I'm a Canadian country artist. I still play around the scene, of course, in St. John's. Keeps the wolves away from the door, but I've been fortunate enough to work with several different artists throughout Canada, and done some work in the States as well. My last 5 singles have been within the top 100 Canadian country charts. My current single just got placed. It's a Christmas single, actually. Just got placed in a Hallmark movie.
I saw that on Instagram.
Yeah. So that was pretty surreal. First placement I've ever had.
When's the movie come out? When's it?
The movie actually came out on November the 27th, Sunday, November 27th. So you can buy it on iTunes or rent it on iTunes. It's on Super Channel in the States, or in Canada. In the States, it's on UPtv. Okay. It's a movie called Christmas in Wolf Creek. And yeah, just excited to kind of get back on the road. I did about 9 weeks this summer through the Maritimes on 2 different trips, and then we did some stuff in rural Newfoundland. Nice. With festivals and the Music NL Awards and so on and so forth. But we're just kind of living I've lived with post-concussion syndrome for about almost 20 years. But now we're living post-COVID syndrome. So just trying to get back to normal and get back into seeing other people and getting out of our homes and getting back to something close to normal.
Right. So before Cassandra asks you about, she's gonna ask you, but just who are you in the background, like growing up, that sort of thing?
Growing up, I was a stupid, rambunctious kid. I think, like a lot of us. Was always active. Played softball, volleyball, a lot of hockey. Still play hockey, stupidly, but a whole lot safer than I used to. Race mountain bikes, love snowmobiles, love ATVs. If there was something stupid you could do, if you could put it in the air and it wasn't supposed to go in the air, I tried to do it. And then that all kind of came to a head. I was 18 years old. I was racing mountain bikes with the Bicycle Newfoundland BNL here, and took a 20-foot drop, overshot the landing, and woke up in a CT machine. Don't really have any recollection in between me going down first until I came to in the machine and had no idea. I was strapped down because they didn't know. I was cognizant, like I was awake, but I didn't know what was going on. I was completely in a fog. I was driving a truck at the time because I had the bike. So my little brother was with me, but I had no idea what was going on. I had no idea that I was hurt. I just knew something wasn't right. I just figured I had a headache. So I drove home. When I walked into the house, my mother, who since passed, was a nurse, and she could see it in my face. You know, I was pillow sheet white. That was it. So it was right away. And I don't remember any of this. All that stuff is all like told to me.
Yeah.
all that stuff is told me from my brother and my mother who were there.
Yeah. Rough.
But even then, I mean, that's almost 20 years ago now. I'm 36. And even then, they didn't, like, the nurses in the emergency room, they knew something was wrong,
Yeah.
but they didn't
No.
necessarily know. And that's the kind of crazy thing that which we briefly touched on before, is that like concussions have come to become such more of a focal point,
Yeah.
because of media and social media. And it's great in the sense that, you know, social media is my nemesis, because I kind of like to live it a little bit more private, but of course, because of what I do,
Okay.
I lose that novelty, or that privilege.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Cassandra, you want to go?
Yeah, so I know you mentioned you have a fairly extensive experience with concussions. Did you want to tell us a bit more about that and maybe some challenges and obstacles you might have encountered along the way?
Certainly. So one of the biggest things I found is that one part of the stigma, and one part of everything that obviously, those of like yourself who study concussions and head trauma, is that, first of all, once you get one, you're getting another one, whether it's diagnosed or not. It's so much easier to get one. I got a concussion from hitting my head off a desk counter. Um, and I'm kind of like, I'm stubborn. I'm the first person to admit it. So something's got to be falling off for me to go to a hospital. But like, I knew exactly at that moment that I had a concussion. Second of all is the residual effects. Residuals in the music industry are great, because that means you're getting paid. Residuals with concussions are absolutely horrendous, because I've gone through nights where I've literally had to fight through a gig because there's a spotlight on you, literally a light beaming down on top of your eyebrows. And that's just, light sensitivity is insane. Sudden movements, depth perception at times can be like, I've talked to friends of mine who have had concussion issues, and a strong history as well. And like, you're looking at a puck and you think the puck is there, and you move your hand. The timing and everything is perfect, but you just move completely over the puck because your depth perception is just not there. And I found, I remember the ECMAs, East Coast Music Awards, were in Charlottetown in 2019. And I had dumped off a snowmobile. You would think I would be smart enough to not do this anymore, but it's another story. But I was about 2.5 months out from that accident, and just the light show. I was sitting in the crowd, but just the light show from, like, I was sat down at a table with a bunch of people. One of them just happened to be a GP, and he just kept looking at me. He was like, "Are you okay? Are you feeling okay? Do you want water?" I was like, "It doesn't matter if it's water or if it's whiskey, if it's, holy water. There's just nothing is going to save me from looking like this." And this is the best way. For those of you who don't know or have never been diagnosed with a concussion, you're literally looking like this. If you take your hands up and you just try to focus on what is going on behind that hand, this is what it seems like. And that's the best way to describe it to people. I've worked with hockey schools and stuff like that. And I've had to talk about this stuff before, because now it's almost to the point where there's a hypersensitivity, and a kid falls and it's like, "Oh, well, you have a concussion." And that's great because it's preventative, but in the same breath, for somebody who has experienced the side of it where, I've been on the worst of it. I've been unconscious. I've been, there. Whereas, yes, there is a small one, but they all need to be addressed 100%. But I also think that there is, that scapegoat that can be used, where people say, "Okay, well, I think I have a concussion. I shouldn't do this." There's one way to look at that. There's the way of okay, I think I have a concussion. I'm going to be preventative, which is great.
Yeah.
But then there's the other side of it is, well, I have a headache. I don't think I'm going to go into the office today. Okay, well, did the 2 bottles of Pinot Noir last night, is that why you have a headache? Or is that, did you fall downstairs and did you hit your head?
Yeah.
And sadly, like I think that concussions personally, and this is not, of course, not to discount any other disease, terminally or otherwise, but I think concussions are one of the scariest and most dangerous injuries because of the unknown.
Yeah.
Like you can get a CT scan. I actually just recently, this is why we started this conversation and reached out. I recently took a foolish tumble trying not to wake my girlfriend up while she was in bed, and I went to the washroom, came back, tripped up, and I hit my stationary bike, which is in the bay window of my bedroom. And she woke up, of course, because of the thud, and there's blood everywhere. I'm about to split my head open. And this one led to like hallucinations, and
Really?
it was crazy, yeah. And of course, that's another side of it, is that not to kind of ramble on, but the spider effect of concussions is the people around you. If you're a concussion, if you frequently have had concussions that don't understand the residual effects of it, I think that is quite scary as well. If you're not familiar with somebody who has concussions, I guess it's like anybody else who may have, some sort of illness, whether it's diabetes, whether it's, anything like that. If you're with somebody as a partner who is not familiar with that, there are moments that can be quite scary when
Yeah.
you're looking at somebody who's suffering through, post-concussion syndromes or
Speaking
symptoms.
of your girlfriend,
Yeah, she just snuck in there. Yeah, she's giving me an invoice that I printed off at about 1 o'clock last night. So it's not an invoice from her, so that's good.
You mentioned, Cassandra, you weren't saying that, but it's sort of question about you were saying the lights, you were on stage and the lights and stuff in your eyes. So how has it affected your touring and your writing? But I guess start off with touring. How's it affected your ability to tour, play live, that sort of thing?
I mean, I find it I find it comes and goes. And as people who are familiar with the head injuries, I have my good days and bad days, whether I'm currently, going through concussions or immediate post-concussion, or if it's just you're having a bad day, you don't feel great, you just, it's kind of like one of those compounding things. It's like it's the domino effect where you're a little bit stressed out, you got a headache because you have a headache, we all get a headache because it's a stress headache or it's a whatever, and then that all just kind of dominoes into thinking of the same thing. And you just focus other ways. There are ways as a musician and as a performer, whether you're in a theater play, or you're a poet or a speaker, there are ways to do it. I find finding focus points, or as I call them, not focus points. So a lot of times when I'm singing, like if the microphone is here, I'm looking at the microphone right now. Now the people ahead of me,
Yeah.
they might think that I'm looking directly at them, but I'm just focusing on my microphone, because that keeps me from getting distracted by everything that comes on up here.
Oh, okay.
So there's just little things that you kind of learn as you go, is the best way to describe it, But yeah, in terms of like effects and performance and stuff like that, I mean, if I've only really skipped out on one or two, and that was because my partner, who just snuck in here and photobombed. We'll talk about later. No, it's she looked at me, she's like, you can't play tonight. You had to sub this out, like you cannot play tonight. And it was like, it was things that I didn't even realize, like I was walking somewhat sideways.
Yeah.
Your equilibrium goes, and like there's so many different symptoms.
Yeah, it's hard to know what you're saying.
it's crazy, right? Like, like vertigo. I had 9 concussions before I ever experienced vertigo. Go to the doctor. I'm like, well, why the heck does it feel like I'm lying down this way and the room is doing this? And I feel like I'm on an inversion board.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, well, have you had a history of concussions or have you had any head injuries? I'm like, did you look at my file? Just look at the file. It's like this big. And then they look at it and they're like, yeah, well, it's amazing that you haven't experienced this before.
Yeah.
So, in terms of professional, I've only kind of skipped out on one. Everything else you just power through, because at the end of the day, and this is a terrible thing to say, and anybody listening, I do not suggest this at all. But for me, I'm just kind of like a power through it and it'll be okay.
Yeah.
Which is the wrong thing to do. Lying in a dark room with some sort of ambient noise lightly in the background, that's the best thing to do. If you're really feeling, if your body is being overcome and overtaken by this, just get the heck away from everything. Turn your phone on airplane mode. You lose a day, or you lose a day of your life, whereas you're going to lose, an exponential amount of days of comfort.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the thing. It's just, you have to eventually, we look at I've heard a couple of your previous casts and done, enough research. I could probably be I could diagnose myself with a concussion easily. I have done it. But the CTE thing is something that I'm sure we'll touch on later. But the CTE thing is crazy because, it can't be diagnosed until an autopsy is done. And how the hell do you know if you got CTE if you're the one getting the autopsy?
The only thing is, like, don't worry about it, but that's way easier said than done. And but that's unfortunately you can do. But I guess Cassandra, I don't know if you sent a question now. Would you like to hop in?
Yeah, no, you briefly mentioned some like challenges, obstacles you've encountered. In some ways, you've kind of gotten through it. Is there anything you found to be helpful in coping and dealing with any of the symptoms you've had?
I find that just doing nothing. I mean, it sounds terrible, but like literally just don't lift the pencil. Don't lift. Like when you get your concussion, you say you get diagnosed with a concussion, they say, okay, well, you have 2 weeks. You had 2 weeks. You don't have 2 weeks. 2 weeks is preventative. All right. You take your 2 weeks and then you try and get you try to move in a way that is going to raise your heart rate. And at the first sign of nausea, at the first sign of blurriness, at the first sign of a headache, and then like that, done. Then you go right back. And if that was 2 weeks at the beginning of it, you get another 2 weeks to go. And it feels like it takes forever, and it's way easier said than done. And I understand that as somebody who is active and has to be doing something at all times. There's no way. And then you gradually do come back. You come back to feeling like it's okay to ride an exercise bike. You feel like it's okay to lift a weight. But for me, in terms of being preventative or dealing with symptoms and stuff like that, I try to avoid like quick jolts to the head, or I don't know. It's almost better in some ways because I'm less skittish, just because I don't want to make that quick jolt to the head, because I'm afraid I don't know how much gel is in between the brain and the skull anymore. I think it's been pretty decreased, and that's another thing that I've studied a little bit into, is that the regeneration of that. I can't remember what it's called. Yeah, like that's not a liver. That doesn't fully regenerate.
What's it called? The cerebrospinal fluid.
Mm-hmm. So, and like that doesn't fully regenerate. So it's I don't know, man. It's so terrible. And if there's one thing that you could say to anybody who's not familiar with them, it's when I talk about concussions, and I've had to talk about this a lot with a lot of different people just to try and make them understand what's going through my head, because
Yeah.
people look at you and they'll say, okay, you're sick. Like, no, I'm not sick. I just,
Yeah. Yeah.
this is what I'm going through right now. And in a sense, I say that I got lucky because my first concussion was one of the worst ones
Yeah.
until I had my next bad one. And my first one taught me a lot really, really quickly.
I hear it.
It's not, it's not a broken bone where it goes in a cast and 6 weeks later it comes out and you can just go right back to normal. It's the scariest part of it is that you could feel completely normal. You can
Yeah.
feel like you did when you were 10 years old and it was your birthday and you're blowing out that stupid McDonald's cake in the ballroom and all your kids, all your friends are around and everything was great. You can feel like that, and then you go to do something. You go to
Move.
reach. You go to reach for something that's about to roll off the counter.
Yeah.
Or like something like a tree branch is going to fall, so you automatically go to try and grab it. And that exertion, the next thing you know, like you're stumbling a little bit, or you start to get into that fog again. And for those of you listening and those if you're watching on. I mean, when you open your four fingers and you look through them, that's the best way that I can describe it to somebody who has never experienced it before.
Yeah. So has this, I mean, I want to ask you about like CT, the long-term effects, but also but more about your songwriting. Is it really like all these, I mean, all these effects that you're talking about, like this basically, I have double vision, so I kind of know the spinning, the vertigo, that whole thing. But is that do you find that has affected the way, not necessarily your songs, but the way you write, like your process and even your, I mean, your lyrics too, but I mean the process by which you go through writing, or do you know the difference even? Been so
Yeah,
long.
no, I definitely notice a difference in the writing, in the sense of, um, it's a focus thing. Like you could be in a writing session, like a writing session could take 10 minutes, it could take 3 hours.
Yeah.
And that, that's again something that's very specific to my discipline of work. But there's a lot of times where I'll get 2 hours in and I'm just kind of like, I gotta check out.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of, okay, we're on to something that we feels great here when it's a co-write, when it's with somebody else. And even when I'm writing by myself, like if I'm struggling and I can't get past this, I know that no matter how much I'm struggling and no matter how much I'm fighting for this to work, I'm not going to further this at this exact moment. So I just kind of like side push it and revisit it. And like focus is a big thing that I find. Like, I do when I look at it from a work perspective, whether it's paperwork or, like going through tax receipts or going through grant submissions and stuff like that, I work way better at night because it's dark.
Yeah.
I sit at my desk, I have a lamp on, I put the fireplace on, and that's the only light that I have. Right? Like for me to sit down for 5 hours at my desk and try to punch through stuff while there's lights beaming in here and lights beaming in here.
Yeah.
I find it's exhausting. It's far more exhilarating. Like it's taking far more out of me to work under that situation than it is while the room is darker and your surroundings are, a little bit more subdued.
Right. So is it like, I mean, and that the process is slow. So does the process itself, as well as your concussions, affect what you write, like the lyrics or even just their music, everything, stuff for your guitar?
Yeah, you could certainly say that it comes in. I think there's a part of the writing process that's always personal, no matter how many times you say, like songs aren't always autobiographical. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I know people who have written love songs who just got their heart broken, and at that point in time, they don't even believe that love exists. But a song is a song. We're storytellers.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to necessarily be about us. But at the same time, life experiences and specific life experiences, whether it's concussions or heartbreak or getting cheated on or losing somebody, or the dog went to the bathroom on the rug or something like that. Like all that stuff kind of comes out in writing it. That's not, there's always that in your back pocket that you can kind of say, oh well, this happened, and it could be, it could be taken several different ways. And that's one of the things about being a writer. I just touched on this briefly the other day in an interview about the Christmas song, is that, like Christmas is a crazy time for a lot of people, because it could be a time that they remember, somebody they've lost, or they have fond memories, or they have terrible memories, or they just love the season. So my song is not specifically that specific song is not necessarily about me and the way that I feel about Christmas, because it's going to hit everybody differently. And that's why I find it quite interesting that it got placed in a movie, because for it to be placed in a movie means that it was specific, and that the musical directors found that it was specific for that scene, and it fit that scene. So that's kind of the fun thing about what I do, is that, Sandra, Nick, Jimmy, James, whomever, can all hear the same song and receive it differently.
So you find about that way, you find it's kind of therapeutic, at least way. I know you were saying before we started recording, you were recording, you were a private person, although we know your music and stuff, and you're on stage and you're performing. But do you find that kind of therapeutic way to reach out to different people?
Yeah, I find writing is very double-edged. Like I said, there's times that you struggle, and there's times that I can't focus, and then there's times where like the words are just kind of coming out, and it's just like, that weight off your shoulders. And I'm not sure, I know you have, Cassandra, have you had head injuries before?
Yes, I've had 6 concussions in the past.
Yeah, there you go. So it's like, it's almost like it's the phantom pain. You hear about somebody who has an amputation, and the worst pain that they have, and that it's excruciating, is in their toe, but their toe is like, from their knee down, their leg has been removed.
Yeah.
The best way to say it, like if you get that release from writing something or speaking with somebody, when you're finally out of your concussion protocol, or whatever you choose to call it, that's like taking the weight of the world off your shoulders, because literally the stress is coming down here. Like, this is where you're weighing so much of this, because it comes back to spinal tissue and spinal fluid.
Yeah.
And again, that's not a medical opinion, that's just like a presumption from me, just because I've felt it. You carry a lot of stress in your upper back and your shoulders, and there's not much more out there to be stressed about than being somebody who is experiencing concussion symptoms.
Exactly. Well, and Cassandra, did you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there's anything you'd like the listeners to know about concussion, just anything in general, or
They suck.
That's
No, she's gone. No.
She's just left.
She snuck out. She never even said goodbye to you guys.
No, I know.
Oops.
Rude.
I'm gonna get yelled at for that as soon as this is over. You know what? Listen to your doctors. Is the first thing. But the other thing is that even if you haven't had a concussion, it's if you have a minute, and I mean, we all have a minute in a day.
Yeah.
And by a minute, I mean like a spell, like your 5-10 minutes while you're watching the football game, the commercials come on, or while you're watching the Desperate Housewives of Conception Bay South, or whatever it is, like, in between episodes, and you want to just kind of like have a palate cleanse, and you want to read about something. Head trauma is there's so much out there to read about, and a lot of it will always come back to the same nucleus.
Yeah.
For like, no pun intended. A lot of it will come back to the same nucleus. But it's like people with heart issues. It's like people who have diabetes and kidney issues. It is an illness. It's not necessarily a disease, but you see the commercials for heart and stroke, and they tell you what to look for.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times you'll go into a hospital, and unless you're on a gurney, you go in, they'll be like, okay, so you have a concussion. Have you had a concussion before? Yes. All right. Well, they give you I don't know if it's like this as much now. But I remember the first time I went in, they say, you have a grade 1, you have a grade 2, you have a grade 3 concussion. Grade 3 concussion, you probably lost consciousness. Grade 2 concussion, you have certain symptoms. Grade 1 concussion, they're like, okay, well, whatever. We saw it this year in the NFL football, where this Tua, I can't remember his last name. I think you were talking to the guy in Michigan State. Yeah.
Ryan last name was tough.
The guy comes out and plays 2 more plays. Like, there's no doubt he has a concussion. The guy fell down.
Yeah.
Like, he didn't fall down because he was like running around in circles on top of a baseball bat to make himself dizzy. Like, he had a head trauma.
Yeah.
And it's just the more that you know, and the more that you can go with and experience and take in platforms like this, like these shows are like a half hour, and it's people talking about it's people who are talking about what they've gone through and experienced this. It's great to know it on both ends. It's great to know that, okay, well, I experienced vertigo. Well, Chris experienced vertigo. And when he went and talked to a neurologist, they said, well, that's probably 9 chances out of 10. It's probably a residual effect of a concussion. But at the same time, my little brother, I think, was in 8 or 9 or 10 when I got my first one. And he idolized me as a kid. So he wanted to be there when I did everything.
Yeah.
When he was 10 years old and he's looking at his big brother, who's practically at the time his hero. I'm definitely not his hero now. He's far more intelligent and well brought up than I am. But when he's looking at me, he has no idea. Like, he's scared to soil himself at this point. He's at that point. It can be very. I've been on both sides of it, where I've seen guys get hit and get concussions and sit down on the bench, and the next thing you know, they just fall backwards. It's out of it, and there's no obviously there's a head trauma there, but it's scary because you're looking at a like the eyes of a shark. Like, they're just completely white. So for those of you who have never experienced it, it never hurts to take 5-10 minutes to read up about these things here and there, if you are that type of person, if you're a curious person. Parents, especially, if you have active children, know the signs, know what to look for, because if you don't know what to look for, you're gonna lose yourself a whole lot of time in an emergency room, and just be, concussions are a cautionary tale. Yeah. And I both love and hate the fact that it is as public now as it is, because it is obviously drawing a whole lot more light, and there is far more exposure on head traumas and head injuries than there was 20 years ago when I played hockey and threw mountain bikes over the side of hills and cliffs and was young and stupid, as opposed to being old and still stupid. But at the same time, don't crutch it. Don't use it as he's got a concussion, because if they don't have a concussion and then they really do have a concussion, that can be far scarier.
Yeah.
Like, if you just don't assume. It's the sort of thing that And this is just personal. This is just like my personal advice, and the way that I view it is, it's not going away. If you keep getting concussions, they are not going away. The residual and the post-concussion syndrome. Post-concussion syndrome is not 2 weeks. It's a syndrome for a reason.
Yeah.
And like I live every day knowing the fact that at any point in time, like this week I was cutting wood. We have fireplaces in the house that we dearly love. So I was cutting wood, and I just had to sit down for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
For no other reason that I was just like, okay, I'm getting a little bit dizzy. I'm getting a little bit, and I'm just overworking my heart rate. Now I'm a month out from my last concussion. So should I have been cutting wood? Probably not. But in the same breath, you're stubborn. So it's kind of like do as I say and not as I do is probably the best way to describe it.
It's a lot of like you got to do something. So you live, you know what I mean, and then that's like I'm back when I talk about this stuff too, because a lot of stuff I'm doing I shouldn't be doing, but it's just because what I know now. But like I shouldn't be as active as I am, or not as active. I should be as active as I am, but I should take it easy sometimes, and I don't. I know that's an issue.
Yeah, but I mean, the other side of that is that like, if you get that first, symptom, whether it's lightheaded or dizzy or your head starts to pound or whatever, just sit down.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You can give yourself 10, 15, 20 minutes. If it's cutting wood, that wood's going to be there tomorrow.
Yeah.
If it's trying to paint the wall, and you get like that wall is going to be there tomorrow, God willing. I mean, barring an act of God.
Yeah.
But other than that, I mean, it's great. It's something that's great to pay attention to. To me, it's interesting, just to see some of the stories. Like I love platforms like this where people can tell their stories, and because not everybody's concussion experience is different. I'm sure Cassandra could probably take another half hour and talk about her exact experiences and the way that she's gone through it and felt, in her experience. So nobody has the same story. We all have the same, again, nucleus of the story, but nobody. I have a friend of mine who played hockey, and he was a bit of a fighter, and 20 years later, since the last time he dropped his gloves playing hockey, he fell off an inner tube on Lake Muskoka a couple summers ago and just basically had to go into shutdown mode because he was right. It can happen so easy, and the first one, it's like that one chink in the armor, It's once you get your first one, the second one's coming. I don't care who you are. I don't care how careful you are. I don't care if you get diagnosed with it. You get one, you're going to get another one. And yeah, other than that, I mean, in synopsis, just it's terrible, but just get educated. I would love to see more education with it. And we do see it in the minor sports programs. I think that's fantastic. And media has been great too. We haven't even touched on the mental health aspect of concussions.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was diagnosed with severe depression. Part of it was things that have gone on in my life and losses and stuff that I've had, and then another part of it is, they do link some part of that to head trauma, and it's
makes sense.
Yeah, 100% makes sense. Like when somebody tells you you can't do something,
they're used to doing it.
like there's just that proud part of your body that says, like F you, yeah, I can do that. Realistically, you can't. You can't do that. And then, like all this stuff compounds, and it's a dirty spider web that just doesn't stop. But at the same time, as long as people are preventative, and it's about knowledge,
Yeah, no, I mean, because what you're talking about there is just what I know. It sounds like you also is like I know I have slowed down. The best you mine more recent of slowing down. I should have slowed down before, but just like you said, like that the log will be there tomorrow. That wall will be there tomorrow. Just just take it in. Just it's not that important even though you're like when you're young, if you can hockey, like you're all gonna fight that guy. Well, I know like it's a point about the game or if you're like I'm gonna take the jump. Like it's if you don't, it's not the end of the world. It's not like it's gonna be like some disastrous event for your life if you don't do it. Just 1 second, just don't do it, and then you'll or just think about think about not saying nothing with the future because when you're young you can't. It's part of being young is you can't really think about the future. It's not the point of it, but then just to and to enjoy every moment, obviously. But to also just to like you said, just realize just take a second, just take a breath and realize that it's not important that it's just done now. It'll be there tomorrow. It'll be there in 2 minutes. It'll be there in 1 second. Just
yeah. Especially when you're dealing with this stuff, it's just I can tell you the dark days of concussions are very dark days.
Yeah.
And the depression that comes with it and the residuals and stuff like that. It's a gnarly thing. It's scary. I mean, I look at what my experience since I've been with Amber and what she's seen with me going through symptoms and stuff like that. Like I wouldn't want to see somebody sleepwalking.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to see somebody hallucinating and thinking that you're in the same room but something is happening over here.
Yeah.
I'm watching something happen. As far as I'm concerned, I'm in a video game and she's lying next to me thinking like there's nothing over there. I don't see anything.
Yeah.
I don't know what and then that's got to be scary. So knowledge just taking podcasts like this. I love podcasts like this, for a workout or for a drive or something like that, just because you're learning about something that everybody's talking about now. Everybody talks about this. It's so out in the open. It's just like every other day, even on your local news, like you listen to VOCM, they're talking about a concussion.
Yeah.
That didn't happen 30 years ago. That didn't happen 20 years ago.
No, exactly. 10 years ago.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's so like it's and it's the sort of thing. It's like if you say it 3 times, you'll remember it. There's an old, I think it was Dale Carnegie or one of those like sales things. They say if you say something 3 times in a row, Chris Ryan. You'll think about Chris Ryan.
Ryan.com.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Chris Ryan music.ca. But that's another story. We're not. This isn't just about music. This is about let's raise some awareness and try and help raise awareness for this because it's gross.
That's what we're trying to. Cassandra and I and the whole board of the Rangers Association. Although Cassandra's not really on the board. Cassandra is an employee, our only employee. But we want to raise awareness, get this around Newfoundland, Labrador. Well, as much as we can, anywhere else, frankly, as much as we can. Podcasts like this, or through going to schools and talking to people, or anything, just going around waste. That's one of our big goals: to try to raise awareness of and make Ranger something that people actually talk about in Newfoundland. I was say St. John, but in Newfoundland, I mean. It's talked about a lot in Canada but only in North America. Only it seems like, and even in the world, it seems like only when there's like sports on and you see somebody, you see it happen, like soccer or rugby or hockey or football. You see it happen, but if you can't see it happen, there doesn't exist. That's not true because it obviously you can't see cancer happen, and cancer exists, and so it's the same thing. It's like I was going to say the same thing. It's not the same thing, but it's like. It's very important that people just realize that it happens otherwise. It happens not just in these major league sports and these professional athletes. But you were talking about also we can only cover it, lump in CT and men depression and all that, and just keep talking about that for 5 minutes. So it's not fair to those things, but just Mentioning a few, well, you just kind of, you don't have the limit of time, so just your CT, your figures of CT or what you know about CT that you think is just, you've had 12 concussions, and who knows how many, I don't know how many hits, some of these specialists who've been diagnosed, they've had like football players, they've had like hundreds and thousands of hits, those are because of hits that are, seem to be the main culprit, so I wouldn't, of course, I'm not a doctor, so, you know, why not?
Yeah, I mean that's just it. You know, like we touched on it earlier, is like how many times did you get hit when you were a kid and you didn't
Yeah.
know what a concussion was? You just kind of got up and you did it anyway. When you look at these guys making millions of dollars and they've got, you know, they're supporting 5 families.
Yeah.
You know, like they're supporting me, mom, papa, and their, you know, their
Yep.
cousins all live with them, and their parents are there, and they're supporting all these people. You know, you're dealing with hundreds of millions of dollars. They don't care about they don't care about the fact that, okay, I got a bit of a headache, I'm still going back in there and taking the next
Yeah.
snap. And you know, that's the sports side of things. But you can get like you can get a concussion. You can get a concussion trimming the branches in your lawn. You can get a concussion clearing out the driveway while after a snowfall. Like, so this isn't just athletes.
Yeah.
And this is kind of one of the funny things that you know, or not the funny thing. That's probably not the right word, but one of the things about concussions that's kind of peculiar is that it has this stigma that it's a sports injury. Yeah, it's a sports injury, but so is breaking your hand.
Yeah.
I know I met a woman last week who broke her hand. She slipped on the ice. She broke her hand. She could have easily had a concussion. If her hand didn't get down quick enough, she hit her head. She could have easily had a concussion.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, you know, that's the only stigma that I don't like about concussions, is that it's specific to sport. It's not specific to sport. It's an injury. It's a broken bone. It's a sprained ankle. It's a separated shoulder. It's you can get that doing so many different things, and the concussion is the exact same thing. It is not specific to sport. You can you know, suffer a concussion just like you can suffer a broken hand or a broken foot, or you know, like, but the residual effect for your mental health is completely different from breaking a hand or
Yeah.
breaking a foot. And you know, the residuals, like, it's just, to me, when I first got diagnosed with depression, I just realized, like, every time I would try and push myself, I was pushing myself to a point where I couldn't do it physically. Why couldn't I do it? And I went back because I was having headaches, I was having dizziness, I was having all this stuff, and then I just became frustrated, and then I just stopped doing stuff, just stopped trying.
Yeah.
You know, I shut down. I was that was it. I was done. And you know, it took some conversations to have with people to actually go have a conversation about it. But you know, the mental illness side of things is you know, that's vast, and again, specific. It's far more specific to I don't know why I took this mic stand out, because it keeps dropping down. You know, it's the mental health, it affects people in different ways. But it certainly is a derivative of head trauma. Obviously, there are a bunch of other factors that do come into it. But I mean, you look at a lot of these big fighters, like the David Boogards and the Rick Rippon and these guys, where they've donated their brains to science, and you know, the CTE, and these guys got hit in the head day in, day out, and it deals with substance abuse. It deals with, you know, all these other things that are, you know, come back to one. Again, I use the word again, and I'm not trying to be a dead horse, but it's true. It's one nucleus. It all comes back to head injuries. And that's why they're taking these pills, because they know that they know that they're going to put their head in a position where it's going to get hit.
Yeah.
You know, you slip and fall. The other side of it is, too, a lot of people don't understand this, and if you read up enough on it, you will. You can get a concussion without hitting your head.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if you, like, I remember I got one of my concussions, I think it was number 7 or number 8. I got tripped up and I went down and I kind of tucked my chin into my chest to keep my head from hitting the ice.
Oh yeah, okay.
And I got up and fell down again. It's like, oh yeah. So I go sit on the bench and
Yeah.
diagnosed with another concussion. Like, so I was like, and at the time, again, without the knowledge, how could I have a concussion? I didn't hit my head. I specifically tried to prevent myself from hitting my head. Nope, still had a concussion. I still rattled that brain. So I don't know what's left up there now. Hopefully a couple good songs, but we'll see what happens moving forward.
I was like, Cassandra, do you want to jump in here? Because we've been talking for a while.
Yeah, no, I think you hit a lot of really good points there, that there's so many different things related to concussion, like substance abuse, mental health issues, that a lot of people don't necessarily associate with it. So I'm really happy that you did hit those points, because that's something I kind of want people to be aware of, that yes, there's that primary injury, but there's also effects other than just the physical effects that come along with that injury.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's yeah. But I mean, other than that, I think we've touched on a ton. You know, again, if I could say one thing in my closure is not only thanks to you guys, but I don't want to beat a dead horse, but knowledge is knowing what's going on with this stuff is it's great. It helps a lot. So you know, just if you have the time and if you're interested, and if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably have suffered like myself or Nick or Cassandra or you know anybody else who's been in the public eye. There's hundreds of thousands of people who go through this. But one thing is, don't be afraid to talk about it. That's one thing that I've always stood by. I have never held back about talking about my experiences with concussions, because I have talked to people who have had a lot of experience with concussions, and that's why I am so open to talk about it. Because it's something that I truly believe needs to be spoken about more. And you know, like it's just like the mental health, this whole Bell Let's Talk and that sort of thing. I mean, that does, you know, skirt the concussion talk a little bit, but you know, it's at the end of the day, you need to talk about it, because if not, you're going to bottle it up, and it's going to come out in a terrible way.
Yeah.
And that's the scary thing, is that it's your brain does funky things. Your brain does. There's a reason that neurologists make as much money as they do, because there's just so much going on up there.
Yeah.
Well, in your brain, mine's a little bit mushy, but yeah. In closing, just talk about it, make it a part of a conversation. And if you know somebody who has had a concussion, just pick their, terrible pun, but
pick the
wasn't
brain.
intentional. Yeah. Pick their brain, and know, because you never know when you're going to be in that situation where you notice somebody fall, or you see somebody get hit and they're not standing right. There's a glaze in their eye. There's a, they just vomit, like all of these things. And that's the crazy thing. There's so many symptoms to a concussion that are the same symptoms that you would get if you had a hangover.
Yeah.
If you had a flu.
Yeah.
If you had, and
kidney disease or something like that.
Yeah, 100%. That was a crazy thing for me when this first all started. Was that like, okay, do I have a hangover because I had a few pops with the guys last night while I was watching the game, or am I not out of that concussion realm yet? Like, am I still like? There's so many masking things, but talk. That's all I could say. As I just did for almost an hour. So
it's a great point, because you've been a really knowledgeable and excellent guest, and hope together we all can raise awareness here in Newfoundland, Labrador, and in Canada, both throughout the world, obviously, but we're here in St. John's in Newfoundland, Labrador. but anywhere in Newfoundland, to raise awareness and get people to talk about this and realize that just not just it's not just sports, it's everybody, it's every life that you can get concussion through multiple ways and multiple isn't even, it seems like a small word, it's usually 2 or 3, but lots, a breadth of symptoms. And but Cassandra, I think I'll let you, before I ask Chris about his social media and which he doesn't like in his website Stop Music, but I'll let you just say what you want to say and advertise the Newfoundland or NLBIA and yourself.
All right, thank you, Nick. Okay, so yeah, if anyone here in Newfoundland Labrador wants to find out anything about brain injury or anything like that, we're here to help you out. So you can go to our website, www.nlbia.ca, or you can follow us on social media, NL Brain Injury Association on Facebook and at NL Brain Injury Association on Instagram. It doesn't have to be anything specific. If you're just curious, you can always reach out and we're here to help.
I think that's great, and hopefully, if you're just curious, you can listen to more of these podcasts and just, as Chris was saying, do some like serious research, not just like googling and finding some random story about concussion, but do some like actual research and look at the sources you're getting and find out like what the like Mayo Clinic, for example, in the States, UHN Concussion Central. And just some real, and I'll say, of course, the NLBIA, but that goes without saying. But I'm gonna just find out some real information about this and real, not just what's written down. Not symptoms are not just what you read on like a short article about like we get headaches or fogginess or dizzy. That's it. That's not it. That's just the most common. That's not it though. There's tons of symptoms. So as Chris was saying, just knowledge. And Chris Ryan music in it, and all that. Chris Ryan, I'll let him say it because I don't want to butcher his website. But
I probably will too. My personal website is chrisryanmusic.ca. You can reach me. You can actually personally reach me right from the website to talk about the music. I'm open about concussions. I'm more than happy to talk about my personal experience if anybody wants to talk about what they're going through. Cassandra, if anything is ever needed or somebody to speak, I'd be more than willing and happy to do that. C Ryan NL on Twitter and Instagram. Chris Ryan Music CA on Facebook, and yeah, go watch Christmas Card Feeling. It's a lovely Hallmark movie. Ho ho ho. Sorry, Christmas Card Feeling is the song. Christmas in Wolf Creek is the movie.
Just say it. Christmas.
Blame it on concussions.
It's Christmas in Wolf Creek, and you can check it out. But most of all, chrisryanmusic.ca for Chris Ryan Music, and well, I guess most of all, to just learn about concussions and brain injury and educate yourself. And thank you all for listening. And hopefully, this will help open up some people's eyes about the importance and prevalence of brain injury, including concussion in Newfoundland, Labrador, in Canada, in the world. But also, just thank everybody for listening. And yeah, I hope you'll listen again. I think this podcast, Chris, just let you know, this podcast will be out tomorrow, because I will now stop the recording. So thank you all for listening.
Thanks, guys.